thing this brings you is privatization.
Yeah,
which
sure.
of course we all know with the middleman you're going to save money.
Just quickly, the moratorium went into effect in 2005, is that what you said? Can you give us a brief overview of what has happened since the moratorium went into effect? Because what you're talking about, I noticed, is that your revenue sources are still constrained, even though there may be some possibility in terms of services. So.
The revenue is simply not coming in right now. We were very heavily dependent upon a capital gains tax that mirrored the federal, and nobody's making capital gains in the market. So when you're that closely tied to how you get your money, you simply don't have the revenue coming in. Were we to get to a point in this timeout period that we exceeded the revenues that were allowable to be kept by government, under TABOR, we would be reinvesting. We think it's about, what, 3.5 billion or? So far we've gotten 3.1 billion that we would have in essence turned around and written checks to people and said, here, keep it, drive over the crumbled bridge at your own caution, but we're able to keep it right now. So we estimate over the full 5-year timeout period it might be $5 billion worth of revenue that have gone into the state coffers to be used for the public good, but we're, I think that's optimistic given the state of our economy right now.
Yeah, right now projections show we'll end up making, because of referendum, about $3.1 billion in excess funds. This year and next year, which are the last 2 years, we're going to get $0 from referendum C because the revenues dropped so much it's not going to be above the limit even if we didn't change and deal with the ratchet effect that the TABOR does. We will though, so projections out about 5–10 years show that we would, given steady economic growth after in the next 2 years after this, in 2 years after, once we start to recover, we will hit the TABOR limit again and then have to start refunding. It's a higher TABOR limit and that's what referendum C has helped us. But it really has, we've been so constrained for so long that we have not done the infrastructure investment that we need to do, and where it's costing us so much more to do it because it's getting to the place where the bridges are literally crumbling. Not that you could have saved it with some patchwork. We have a bridge over the I-70 corridor that goes through downtown Denver, the I-70 viaduct. It's $800 million to fix. Just to fix that one bridge that goes about 2 miles. And if we did it when it started, it probably would have been half that price to do it. But we had not had the money to do it. It was going to cost us, probably by the time we do it, probably $1.2 to $1.5 billion.
And something else worth noting is that in Colorado, they had already had a limit in place in the statutes, and it was called the Arv-Scott-Byrd 6% limit. It's much like your LD1 that you have here, which already puts a limit in. And so the thing is that then they put TABOR on top of that, and then you had all these unintended problems that happened. So one thing, much to the credit of Representative Ferrandino and others in the state legislature, they removed that 6% limit because that was the most immediate problem that they had to deal with. So that was at least the first step in untangling the mess that they've been in. You put in TABOR on top of LD1, you're going to be back in that same situation that they faced. So it's very similar in that aspect.
Hi, thanks for mentioning the roads in Colorado because I told this once before, but that's not my question. But I've had to go from the Denver airport to Castle Rock in snowstorms, and I can appreciate the fact that Denver doesn't have state-of-the-art snow removal equipment 24/7.
And it snows until June.
And it's next to June, but at least I know. So snow removal to me is huge in Maine. But my question was, Maine is so heavily dependent on tourism. And the roads being so essential to that, but also our airports. And I didn't know, did that have any impact on the Denver airport or on ability for people to fly from here to there? Because our jetport in Portland is already in a very competitive situation with Manchester and Boston, and even Hartford. And so any impact that the airport would have to absorb as a result of TABOR would increase that competitive disadvantage. So I was just curious about that, having flown into Denver many times.
The regional airports were were more heavily impacted. DIA is our international airport, and it's an entity in and of itself. But the regional airports suffered from lack of infrastructure surrounding them. And I mean, you will suffer the way we are. We compete with Utah for ski traffic. Utah has very easy access transportation to their major ski areas. We have to use that I-70 corridor, which is much like your Route 1 and 95. In heavily trafficked times, winter and summer for us, it's a parking lot. And if you can go to another state and have a similar amenity and not have to deal with it, you probably, have made your last trip to Maine or made your last trip to Colorado, because the hassle's too much. And we can improve these. We had a population increase between 1992 when TABOR passed and 2001 of 1 million people. Because the formula is population plus growth, we were not able to calculate the population increase. So in essence, we were returning checks to people that should have gone into the state coffers to improve services because we had the people there, but we had to play catch up and convince our Republican governor we needed to use the growth dividend to go back and recapture dollars that should have been for the people who were in the state. You have a dissimilar problem because you have an aging population that will need more services as years come on, or that you want to give a homestead exemption to, which we have suspended our senior homestead exemption. The very people who need